It's Bible time with me, Jared. We're going to do episode 13. Oh, my name's Andrew. This is Bible time, episode 12. Get your seatbelt, strap your seatbelts in. We're going to 20 minutes through Psalm 2. We know, Andrew, it needs to be under 10 or no more than 12. 30 minutes every day. I'm Andrew. 30 minutes. Psalms forever. ah. All right, well, we are back. This is Bible Time, episode 13. Go grab your family and let's get started. Today we are looking at Paul's prayer. And this brings us to 2 Timothy 1, verse 3. And I think a lot of times whenever we think and approach Paul's prayers, we kind of go, oh, hey, that's a nice prayer. Maybe, thank you for teaching me how to pray, Paul. Now I got some good prayer habits, things like that. And while those things are true to be sure, we need to remember that this isn't just some general prayer that we're about to read, that this prayer is designed for this book, that this prayer is Paul's, it's tailor-made for this letter. And if you need an illustration, whenever Missy and I were preparing to get married, here's Missy. She has a full head. There we go. All right. Here's Missy. Here's me. All right. And we went to a suit shop. And in the suit shop, the tailor, his name was Moses. And what a name. All right. And Moses didn't have a beard, but his name's Moses. So our stick figure, we will give him a beard. And whenever we told Moses, hey, we're getting married, we need a suit, Moses did not say, hey, you know what? Here is a suit that fits Andrew Hartung. So just slap this suit on and you'll be just fine. Moses didn't go, hey, here is a Pastor Steve size suit and just slap this thing on and you'll be good. No problems there. No. Instead, what Moses did was, he got his little measuring tape out and he measured my arms and he measured my shoulders and he went and measured my legs and he just measured everything. And what he did was he got this very tailored suit for me, and it fit perfect. It fit like a glove. And in the same way that Moses tailored a specific suit for a specific situation, this prayer right here is also tailored for a specific situation for this letter. It is tailored for the moment whenever Paul passes off the baton to Timothy and then he'll pass away. And so if the questions are, what is Paul's hope for writing this letter? What is Paul's desired outcome and impact for writing to Timothy? What does Paul want this epistle to result in? Well, this prayer will answer all of these questions. And so let's get into it. Paul starts off with, I thank God that Paul has this deep disposition, that he has this complete satisfaction towards God. And this is kind of weird because, as you know, Paul is in prison, but even so, Paul is active in his thankfulness towards God. And this isn't the kind of thankfulness that just ends with a head nod and, hey, God, thank you. And then, you go back to forgetting about God or whatever you were doing before. This is the kind of thankfulness that leads to action. And that's why we see what we see with this next phrase, whom I serve. The God whom Paul serves. And this word for serve right here is not the normal word that you would typically expect. This word is attached to sacred and holy service. The sacred and holy service of a priest. More specifically, nerd alert, this word right here is the Greek equivalent of the Hebrew word for serve that we've previously seen in Daniel chapter, anybody want to take a guess? Daniel chapter 7, verse 14. That is this word right here. And if you remember in Daniel 7, where Daniel sees a vision, and in Daniel 7, he sees this vision of the Son of Man who's presented to the Ancient of Days, where the Son of Man is coronated as the King, and to the Son of Man is presented dominion and glory and the kingdom, and this is key, where all peoples, nations from all languages serve him. And so when Paul uses this specific word for serve, we not only know the grandeur and the splendor of the king whom Paul serves, but we are reminded once again of the greater context of Paul's ministry, that there is a bigger picture and that Timothy needs to see this bigger picture, that Timothy, he needs to zoom out, so to speak, and remember that serving God is sacred, that there are no mundane moments in ministry, that it is all holy. And that it all leads to that final and epic moment that Isaiah and Ezekiel and Daniel saw and that Paul saw on the road to Damascus. And like Timothy, we also need to remember the bigger picture of ministry, that serving the church is not your everyday typical kind of work. And we cannot think of serving the church as something that's small or something that's mundane, even in the seemingly insignificant and replaceable tasks like setting up chairs, because serving the church is profound. Serving the church is eternal work, because that's the kind of service that is a foretaste of the service that Christ Jesus receives in the end. That's why we serve the church in whatever capacity we can find, whether it be Pastor Steve preaching on a Sunday or it be somebody taking out the trash after an all-church lunch, that there is no mundane. There's only profound, and there's only eternal. You want to make something of your life. You want to be a part of something bigger. Leave behind a legacy. Make your life count. Then Paul says it's simple. You serve the church. Paul knows what counts. He knows what lasts. He knows what is eternal. And Paul's prayers for Timothy and for us to know the same thing, that we must align ourselves with the right things, that we need to orient our life around that which actually matters. And look at how Paul does all of this. He says, I did all of this with a clear conscience. This phrase, with a clear conscience, is looking at the nature and the characteristics of Paul's ministry. That his ministry, from the beginning to the middle to the end, that it is intertwined with things like love from a pure heart, a sincere faith, a fear of the Lord, hope, the truth, holiness, and godliness. That's how he served God, with a clear conscience, with a clear conscience. And look at this next phrase, the way my forefathers did. Was Paul's ministry to the Gentiles, radical? Did he break the gospel through to them, even in pain, even in near-death experiences? To be sure. But Paul says that this ministry, he says, here's me, Paul. Paul says this ministry I inherited, that it passed down to me, and that he got to the end because this person right here got to the end. And this person right here got to the end because this guy right here got to the end. And this guy got to the end because this person got to the end. And what this phrase does is this would be massively comforting for Timothy, because Paul tells Timothy, hey, I got to the end, therefore you can also get to the end. And it would also do this. Paul says, look, I got here, you can get here. But now the reason why you need to get to the end is so that you can do the same thing. And so that now you can pass it down and pass this ministry off to the next man and to the next woman in line. You must get to the end at all cost. Pass it off to the next generation. And all this brings us to our final phrase that we'll look at today. And it is, as I constantly remember you in my prayers night and day, as I constantly remember you in my prayers night and day. And this phrase does a lot of things. And as we've just seen, Timothy is the man of the hour. He is the next man in line. And so, of course, Paul constantly thinks about Timothy night and day. But we also hear Paul's tone of love once again, that the thought of Timothy does not escape Paul's mind, because Timothy is Paul's beloved child. And within the larger context of Paul and Timothy's relationship, if you go back and you read texts like, pretty much all of 1 Timothy, Paul lays down the law in 1 Timothy. Paul rebukes Timothy and says, do not leave Ephesus. But whenever Paul writes this phrase, as I constantly remember you in my prayers night and day, it's as if Paul clears the air. And he says that rebuke does not define our relationship. My love for you does. And so don't ever forget that. And so that's been the first verse of Paul's prayer for Timothy, and we'll read more of this prayer together tomorrow.
All right, that was episode 13 of Bible Time at Faith. Now it's time for question time with Tommy. We have 3 questions for you today. 1, why is serving the church profound? All right, question 2 is, how can you serve the church no matter your age? And question 3, Paul was thankful to God even though he was in a tiny little jail cell. What are you thankful for in your current situation? All right, that's it. Thanks for joining us. We will see you tomorrow for episode 14.